The morning of August 30th dawned radiant in the Texan city of Dallas, painting the sky with golden hues. In contrast to the warm weather, a group of people gathered in the cemetery. There were not many people there. You could count on your finger. Two older gentlemen who talked among themselves, a ragged drunk who had met Charlie at a difficult time, and a man in an overcoat with a tired countenance who wandered from one side of the coffin to the other, looking impatient. But what caught the attention of anyone who saw that scene that morning of August 30th was a mutt dog impatient with the situation. He cried and groaned, while another element, Father Emiliano, wove the last words. That was Max, a shaggy-haired, kind-eyed mongrel who had followed Charlie at every step, as if he had been his loyal guardian for the past 10 years. Charlie's life was a saga of ups and downs, marked by difficulties and challenges that only those who lived on the streets can understand. Charles, or Charlie as he was known to friends, had a life marked by challenges and adversity from an early age. He grew up in a poor neighborhood of the small town of Pandale, where violence and lack of opportunities were a constant reality in his life. His parents, struggling to survive, were barely able to support the family, leaving Charlie and his siblings from a very young age at the mercy of the streets. From a young age, Charlie had to learn to turn around on his own. He began first by trying to turn around by selling bullets, and also by begging on the street. Until he got involved with bad company, trying to find a sense of belonging in the midst of the chaos that surrounded him. It was a form of self-defense, since he came to be not only respected, but from crime he managed a way to survive. His choices obviously weren't always the best, and soon he found himself involved in illegal and increasingly risky activities to survive. Not that Charlie was a bad person, but reality pushed him down that path, and when he realized he was already completely sunk and involved, there was no way out. Because of this, little by little, Charlie became estranged from his family and friends, who, realizing the paths he traced, plunging deeper and deeper into a world of violence and criminality, decided to leave him aside. The opportunities for a better life seemed more and more distant, and he felt trapped in an endless cycle of despair and hopelessness. But the crime was only the beginning of the tragedy. Soon he became addicted to more than one substance, and then crime became the way he found to feed his addiction. He was already over 20 when he was totally destroyed by drugs, and it was around that period that Charlie found himself homeless, without a family and without hope of a better life. The streets became his home, and he struggled to survive amid squalor and abandonment. But even in the most adverse conditions, around this time, also that trying to leave everything that confronted him and reminded him of the past, he began to walk around, aimlessly, like a wanderer on the road. After years of living in the shadows of crime and drugs, Charlie had finally made a radical decision: to leave everything behind and start a new life. At the age of 24, he was determined to leave behind the dark world of the streets and seek a fresh start, away from the temptations that had consumed him for so long. With a backpack on his back and his heart full of uncertainty, Charlie set off on a lonely journey, without a well-defined direction or destination. He wandered the dusty roads and forgotten paths, first through Texas, and then across the United States, leaving behind the shadows of his past and seeking the light of a better future. Every step he took was an opportunity to leave behind the painful memories and regrets of the past. He walked with determination, facing the challenges of the road with courage and resilience. With each new dawn, he renewed his hope of finding redemption and forgiveness for the mistakes he had made. Throughout his journey, Charlie met people who, like him, were looking for a second chance at life. Others who had simply decided to go out there and explore the world. He shared his stories and his pains, finding comfort in the company of those who understood his struggles and his battles, mostly short companions, passengers on a journey Charlie felt would last a lifetime. Together, they formed a community of lost souls, united by hope for a better future. Already traveling 2 years ago when Charlie met Sophie, she was like a cool breeze in the middle of the arid desert of Charlie's life. A free-spirited and kind-hearted hippie, she crossed his path on a sunny June day while he was lounging in the shade of a lonely roadside tree. Charlie watched Sophie approach, making no mention of moving from where he was, concentrating only on not sleeping, as he judged it inopportune at that moment. Sophie smiled at him, a radiant smile that lit up the world around him, and Charlie felt as if he had found an oasis in the middle of the desert. The girl approached, looking excited. "Hello.
I'm Sophie.
What about you?" Charlie replied, smiling. "Charlie. Nice to meet you, Sophie." "It's my pleasure, Charlie. Have you been here long?" Charlie replied, "More than I'd like. Life is not always easy on the roads. Can I sit down?" "Sure, feel free," he answered by straightening his old knapsack to the side. They talked for hours on end in that same place, sharing stories and dreams, laughing together like there was no tomorrow. For the first time in years, Charlie had realized that he had dreams. Before that, he thought he was not someone worthy of dreaming. And that was what charmed him most about Sophie. She was the one who showed him his human side. "Well, I don't want to be here all day." Sophie commented at one point that the sun was no longer so strong. "Where do you intend to go?" Charlie asked, not wanting to miss that company. "Maybe the beach, I don't know." "Where do you want to go?" "I don't know. I never stopped to think if I wanted to go somewhere." "Well, then let's go. Here it will be difficult to hitchhike." "Shall we? You want me to go with you?" Charlie asked. "Yes, of course. Don't you want to go?" Charlie and Sophie walked along the dusty road, their backpacks on their backs and hearts full of enthusiasm for the adventure that awaited them. The sun was still shining in the sky, casting its golden rays over the barren landscape as they advanced towards the unknown. As they walked, they spotted a car parked on the side of the road, in an already more moving place. Without hesitation, Charlie and Sophie ran towards the vehicle, hitchhiking, eager to continue their journey towards the coast. The driver, a friendly man with a warm smile, waved at them. "Hey, do you guys need a ride? I'm going to Charleston, and I can take you there." Sophie looked at Charlie excitedly, her eyes shining with happiness. "Lucky you, Charlie. It seems that the universe is conspiring in our favor." Charlie agreed, grateful for the stranger's generosity. "Yes, it seems so," I said, smiling. And so, they boarded the car, eager for what fate had in store for them. As the road stretched out before them, Charlie and Sophie shared laughs and stories, enjoying every moment of the journey together. And as the sun set on the horizon, casting shades of orange and pink across the sky, they knew they were embarking on a journey that would change their lives forever. It was almost night when Charlie and Sophie finally reached the coast, where the sea stretched out before them, vast and imposing. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, tinting the sky with golden and orange hues as they walked along the beach. Sophie ran towards the water, her feet sinking into the soft sand. "Let's go swimming, Charlie!" she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Charlie smiled and followed Sophie to the seaside. The water was cold but invigorating, and the two dived in together, laughing and playing in the gentle waves. For a moment, Charlie forgot all his worries and let his past dissolve, lost in the sense of freedom and happiness that surrounded him. After swimming for a while, they returned to the beach and set up camp near the sand dunes. Charlie lit a fire, while Sophie spread a blanket on the floor for them to lie down. As the crackling flames filled the air, they shared stories and laughs around the fire, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of nature around them. The sound of waves crashing on the beach created a soothing and comforting soundtrack, wrapping them in a comforting embrace. As night fell on them, Charlie felt a sense of peace and contentment that he had not experienced in a long time, or perhaps had never experienced. He looked at Sophie next to him, admiring her beauty in the firelight, and knew that that moment would be a memory that he would keep forever in his heart. As the days passed, Charlie's fascination with Sophie only increased, and little by little they continued to explore the coast of South Carolina. Soon Charlie found out that Sophie was a talented artist, and she soon invited Charlie to join her in her makeshift workshop, where she created beautiful pieces of crafts from copper wires. Under his patient and skillful guidance, Charlie discovered a hidden talent that even he didn't know he had. He plunged headlong into the world of art, experimenting with new techniques and exploring his creativity in ways he had never imagined before. It was late afternoon on a secluded beach still in South Carolina. They were sitting around a small makeshift campfire when Sophie asked, "Have you tried working with copper before?" "Never." "What did you do before to survive?" "I always turned around as I could. Since I was little, it was never a problem." While working side by side, Charlie and Sophie shared moments of intimacy and connection. Their hands touched as they shaped and intertwined the threads, and their gazes met amid the creative spark that brought them together. They were living in the present, enjoying every moment together as if it were their last. "You're doing a great job, Charlie." "Thank you, Sophie. It's all thanks to you." In the heat of the moment, that short relationship blossomed into a fiery and intense passion. They gave themselves to each other with a purity of emotion that transcended words, exploring the limits of their love in a dance of desire and ecstasy. Each kiss was a promise of eternity, each hug a reminder that they belonged to each other, now and forever. Charlie, overcome with emotion, said, "I've never felt like this before, Sophie." Sophie replied, "Not me either, Charlie. You are special to me." But like all good things, their brief but intense relationship came to an end. Circumstances separated them, leading them down different paths on their individual journeys. Sophie possessed the free spirit, and Charlie still possessed bonds created by all his sad history up to that point. But what they shared would never be forgotten, as it left an indelible mark on their hearts, reminding them that true love is eternal, even when people part. In those days after Sophie's departure, Charlie felt lost and lonelier than ever. He isolated himself in a small forest near the coast of North Carolina, where he spent several days reflecting on his life, barely eating and barely sleeping, turning over to himself all his choices and the direction his life had taken. When he came out of this stage of deep mourning, he began to walk aimlessly through the streets of the city, watching people rush past, each immersed in his own reality and wondering where he fit into that world. Something seemed to have been torn from him. At night, when silence enveloped the city and he was alone in his dark corner, Charlie would take a notebook and pen and start writing, trying to somehow vent the pain he felt. At first, it was just scattered thoughts, loose words that flowed from his mind to paper, without any form or structure. But as he continued to write, something inside him changed. He found that he liked the feeling of putting his emotions into words, of giving shape to his deepest and innermost thoughts. He found solace in poetry, in the way words could express what he couldn't say out loud. Over time, Charlie began to devote more and more time to his writing. He read poetry books that talked about love and about broken hearts, and practiced tirelessly, honing his skills as a poet. He discovered that poetry was his voice, his way of connecting with the world around him and sharing his true essence with others. Over the following days and weeks, Charlie transformed from a lost and lonely man into an inspired and passionate poet. He found purpose and meaning in his words, and knew that no matter what the future held, he would always have the poetry to guide him on his way. But even as he sought redemption, Charlie knew the past still haunted him. The shadows of violence and crime still hung over him, reminding him of the choices he had made and the consequences he had faced. However, he was determined not to let his past define his future, and he continued his journey with courage and determination. As he wandered the roads, Charlie found beauty in the simplicity of outdoor living. He admired the vastness of the starry skies and the beauty of the natural landscapes that he encountered along the way. Each new setting was a reminder that life was a journey of discovery and that there was beauty even in the most difficult circumstances. Absorbed in the world of poetry, Charlie began to attend soirees and other settings intended for poets, where he could read their writings without caring about being judged or misunderstood. And it was in this way that unassuming Charlie found comfort in the arms of another woman, Candy. She was different from Sophie, more daring and impulsive, a free soul who intensely lived every moment. His infectious smile and vibrant energy attracted Charlie like a magnet, and he found himself increasingly involved in his world. At one of the soirees she attended, more as a way of healing her broken heart from her verses than from feeling the need to expose her poems to others, Candy, who was leaning against the wall of the hall with a glass of beer in her hand, watching the movement around her when her eyes met that of a lonely man, with a distant look and an aura of melancholy that intrigued her, was Charlie. And it was she who approached him. "It's a good soiree, isn't it?" she commented casually, trying to start a conversation. Charlie, surprised at the approach, turned to face her. "It is, yes, it is," he replied, somewhat disconcerted. "You seem a little lost around here." "It's the first time I've seen you around." Charlie shrugged. "I just arrived in the city. You know, I'm just taking a look." "I understand." Candy nodded, noticing the tired expression in his eyes. "You seem to be in need of something more than just taking a look." Charlie hesitated for a moment, but then sighed. "You're right. I'm here to introduce you. I've been around. Want to take a look at what I wrote?" "Of course, I think it's great," Candy replied with an encouraging smile. "Okay, then." Charlie took a sip of his drink and looked at her, handing her a shabby notebook. Candy tilted her head, curious. "That's interesting. So here we have a traveling poet. What broke your heart?" he asked, smiling. Charlie blushed blushingly and sighed again, seeming to struggle with his own memories. "Well, life doesn't always go the way we planned, does it?" Candy nodded understandingly. "I think I know what you mean. Sometimes things just get out of our control." "Exactly." Charlie stared at nothing for a moment before turning his attention to Candy. "And you? What are you doing around here?" "I run a little cafe here in town," she replied. "It's a simple life, but it has its moments of satisfaction." Charlie nodded. "It looks good. Sometimes simplicity is all we need." The two exchanged a meaningful glance, sharing a moment of mutual understanding amid the bustle of the soiree. And in that instant, a silent connection was established between them, uniting two lonely souls in search of comfort and understanding. At the end of his presentation, Candy came to talk to him again. And that same night, they were already together, in Candy's small apartment less than 2 blocks away. At first, the relationship with Candy was exciting and full of passion. They spent sleepless nights together, exploring the darkest corners of the city and indulging in all the pleasures that life had to offer. But little by little, Charlie began to realize that Candy had a dark side, a dangerous addiction to drugs that threatened to consume her, and because of this, he waged an insane war to stay sane. Candy enjoyed living on the edge, experimenting with a variety of substances that transported her away from reality. And without realizing it, Charlie found himself dragged back into the world of drugs, succumbing to the temptation to escape his own demons. He could not resist, and when he realized it was again delivered that same endless cycle. As his addiction intensified, Charlie drifted further and further away from his passion for poetry. The words that once flowed freely from his mind now seemed distant and unattainable, lost amid a fog of numbness and despair. He became a spectator of his own life, passively watching as she slipped through his fingers. Meanwhile, Candy continued her journey of self-destruction, taking Charlie with her on her downward spiral. And as the shadows of dependence closed in around him, he wondered if he would ever be able to find his way back to the light. It was on one moonless night in the sky that Charlie found himself enveloped in a confused haze, his mind clouded by the mixture of psychoactive substances. He felt a growing anxiety taking hold of his being, slowly suffocating him. On an impulse, he got up and started walking, moving away from the chaos of the environment where they were, a small beachfront ballad. Candy, worried about Charlie's sudden change in behavior, tried to catch up with him. "Charlie, wait, where are you going?" But his words fell on deaf ears, for Charlie was already determined to get away from that situation. He barely heard Candy's call as he walked away, his quick footsteps echoing in the emptiness of the night. Disoriented and lost in his own tumultuous thoughts, Charlie eventually found a nearby bus stop. Without looking back, he boarded the first bus that appeared, with no definite direction other than to escape the confusion that consumed him inside. As the bus plowed through the dark roads of the night, Charlie felt plunged into a sea of regret and uncertainty. And so it was, abruptly, without ever exchanging another word with Candy, that Charlie moved on, leaving behind what could have been and facing the unknown that awaited him in his uncertain future. Charlie landed in Miami the next morning with a feeling of emptiness and helplessness. He looked around, observing the bustle of the city that never slept. The bright lights and towering skyscrapers seemed distant and strange to him, a foreigner in his own land. With nowhere to go and no resources to support himself, Charlie found himself lost in a sea of uncertainty. Sobering up with the morning lights, he also soon remembered the poetry notebook he had left behind in Candy's apartment, realizing with more regret than the lack of his savings that a part of himself was now lost somewhere far away and that he would never get it back. With hesitant steps, Charlie wandered the busy streets of Miami, seeking temporary shelter on park benches and marquees of closed shops. His mind was clouded with lack of sleep and physical exhaustion. That first day, as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and pink, Charlie found a small refuge in a secluded alley. He cringed against the cold wall, feeling small and insignificant before the vastness of the city around him. It was there, in the solitude of the night, that Charlie began to reflect on his past and his uncertain future. He wondered how he had gotten to this point, losing himself in a maze of bad decisions and regrets. But even in the depths of the darkness, a flame of hope still burned within Charlie. He knew he needed to find a way to get back on his feet, to rediscover his passion for poetry and life, to truly understand his place in the world. And so, with renewed determination, he promised himself that he would find a way to rise from the ashes and find a new purpose for his wandering existence. At dawn on the 4th day of aimlessly wandering the beaches of Miami, when the sky was still being tinged with shades of pink and orange, Charlie walked along Surfsea Beach, his feet sinking into the soft sand. It was a quiet moment before the hustle and bustle of the day began, and he appreciated the peace that only the sea could offer him. Maybe because the sea reminded him of Sophie, and every morning he wondering where she was, wondering if they would ever see each other again. As he walked, he spotted an older man setting up some chairs and umbrellas in an area near the shore. The man approached and greeted the man with a nod. "Good morning," said the man, smiling gently at Charlie. "I need a hand here. My employee has not arrived and I am a little overwhelmed. You wouldn't be interested in earning a few bucks for a few hours of work, would you?" Charlie looked around, pondering the offer. He needed money to survive, and helping with that task seemed like an honest way to get it. In addition, he liked the idea of spending more time near the sea, where he felt at home. "Of course," he replied with a smile. "I can help for a few hours. What do you need me to do?" The man quickly explained the tasks that needed to be done, and Charlie promptly got to work. Even before the sun came up, he was preparing the equipment and setting up the tents for the first customers of the day. The smell of the sea and the fresh breeze invigorated their senses, bringing a sense of renewal and hope. Throughout the day, Charlie interacted with bathers, helping them choose surfboards, giving tips on the best spots to catch a wave. Even if he didn't know it, he would invent and unwind, making sure everyone was safe and comfortable on the beach. Despite his own tumultuous journey, he found joy in being part of other people's experience, sharing some of his passion, even if belated, for the sea. But for now, he was grateful for the opportunity to start over, to find purpose amid uncertainty. He worked hard. It was very easy in the face of the things he had been through, and he had fun in the sun. Interacting with people, he felt important and that he was being seen. It made him satisfied. In the evening, after the crowd began to dissipate and the beach began to empty, Charlie began to straighten everything out, watching the sunset over the calm waters. He wondered about his own future, about the dreams that still waited to be realized and the challenges he would still have to face. "Hey boy, you work with gusto. Don't you want to come back tomorrow?" "Me? Thanks, but now I've arrived in the city. I have nowhere to stay." The Lord looked at him more closely. "Is that enough for now? It's been about 4 days. Under him." "You know, Charlie," the man began, as he adjusted one of the chairs, "if you're willing to help out here on the beach, I can offer you a place to stay. I have a kiosk there in that area, with a small kitchen, bathroom, and even a bedroom. It's not much, but it can be a roof over your head." Charlie was momentarily surprised by the man's generosity. He didn't expect such a kind offer, especially from someone he had just met. The prospect of having a place to stay was tempting, especially if it meant being able to continue working on the beach, where he felt so comfortable. "That would be awesome," Charlie replied, gratitude evident in his voice. "I would love to accept your offer." "Thanks." The man smiled, looking pleased with Charlie's answer. "Great. As of today, you can consider the kiosk your home. And don't worry about the rent. Your work here will be more than enough to cover your expenses, and there will be extra money left over." With a smile from ear to ear, Charlie thanked the man once again, feeling truly blessed by the opportunity that had just arisen. He knew he had found something special in that place and was determined to do his best to repay the kindness extended to him. Now, with a place to call home and a job that kept him busy and satisfied all week, Charlie felt like he was finally starting to find his place in the world again. And as he continued to help people with their surfboards and enjoy the serenity of the beach at sunset, he knew he had found something far more valuable than just a place to stay. He felt he had found true purpose. After a few years of hard work and adjusting to his new life on the beach, Charlie found himself more comfortable and confident than ever. He had his daily routine well established, helping bathers with their surfboards during the day and attending soirees and writing poems during the night. I knew the beach like no one else. Over time, he began to compile his writings into small handmade books, which he sold to tourists and local residents passing by the beach. On that particular day, as he packed the books in his makeshift tent on the sand, he noticed a familiar figure approaching. His heart jumped when he recognized Sophie, the girl with whom he had shared such special moments years ago. "Sophie?" he called, his voice mixing surprise and joy. Sophie slowly turned in the direction of the voice, and her eyes lit up as she recognized Charlie. She took a hesitant step in his direction, a shy smile playing on her lips. "Charlie, I can't believe it's you," she said, her soft voice charged with emotion. Charlie approached her, unable to contain his own smile. "I can't believe it's you either. What are you doing around here?" Sophie explained that she had decided to take a spontaneous trip to the beach to reconnect with herself and the world around her. She had spent a long time in Alaska, enjoying the icy lands of the north, and now she felt that she wanted some sun and sea. As the two talked, Charlie felt a mixture of nostalgia and hope bloom within him. He had never forgotten the moments they had spent together and had always wondered what had happened to Sophie after they broke up. Now, with her there before him, he wondered if there was a chance to rekindle the flame they had shared. That same day, Charlie invited Sophie to join him at one of the soirees on the beach. And as they walked across the sand together toward the soiree, with the gentle sound of the waves in the background, Charlie felt a renewed sense of optimism. Who knows what the future held for him and Sophie? Maybe, just maybe, they could find a new way to share their lives once again. As the days passed and Charlie tried to readjust to Sophie's presence in his life, realizing that even with all her advances, there seemed to be no expectation of romance, he found that the task was more difficult than he imagined. Every look, every friendly gesture, revived memories of their shared past and nurtured a fragile hope that he struggled to extinguish. But time had passed and things would never be as they had been. Try as he might, Charlie couldn't silence the voice in his mind that called for a deeper connection with Sophie. Every moment I spent next to her was torture, a constant reminder of what could have been and what would never be. In the midst of this internal battle, Charlie felt increasingly mentally disturbed, especially seeing Sophie with others, living her life as if he meant nothing. Her thoughts oscillated between the desire to move on and the overwhelming craving for something she knew she couldn't have. He found himself lost in a maze of conflicting emotions, unable to find a way out. Then, on a night of sleeplessness and agony, something inside Charlie broke. A painful realization befell him, clear and undeniable. He could not continue to live this way. He couldn't bear the torture of being around Sophie without being able to express his true feelings. His poems that day acquired a dark aspect about the tragic human condition, and romanticism began to give way to an exarchate pessimism. He realized that there was no place for him there, in that city where memories now haunted him around every corner, not just as mere specters, but rather as someone of flesh and blood. He needed to leave everything behind and start again somewhere where his mind could find peace. And so the next morning he said goodbye to his boss, said goodbye to Sophie only in a letter that he left for her, took a backpack and left. He left behind his life on the beach, and especially his dreams of a future with Sophie that proved impossible. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult and lonely, but he also knew that it was the only way to find redemption for his tormented soul. And with a heart heavy with sorrow and hope, he set out in search of a new beginning. Determined to leave behind everything that held him in that city of painful memories, Charlie plotted his destiny toward the distant horizon of Alaska. Somehow Sophie's words about that vast wasteland left him ecstatic. He longed to find a refuge where he could live in peace, away from the memories that haunted him and the people who bound him to the past. Without looking back, Charlie embarked on a lonely journey to the wild and untamed north. He hitchhiked in trucks, in cars, and also clandestine hitchhiking on trains, walked along the dusty roads, crossed the dark forests and climbed the majestic mountains, each step taking him closer to his final destination. Hunger and pain were almost nil obstacles to his determination. Finally, after weeks of that solitary journey, Charlie caught sight in the distance of the vast icy landscapes of Alaska stretching out before him. He felt a shiver of excitement and awe as he contemplated the wild vastness that stretched to the horizon, a world of beauty and danger where he hoped to find the redemption he had long sought. Without hesitation, Charlie plunged into the loneliness of Alaska, looking for a wasteland where he could build his new life. He roamed the vast icy plains, explored the dense forests and deep valleys, looking for the perfect place to settle. After days of tireless searching, Charlie finally found what he was looking for. A small, isolated village among the mountains, far from civilization and the memories that haunted him. Charlie plunged deeper and deeper into the loneliness of life in the mountains. Soon he got a small job where he cut firewood in the forest. That was enough to survive. He also learned about hunting, and in this way, when he was not working, he spent his days hunting and fishing, surviving on the riches of those icy lands. At night, he would take refuge in his hut, warming himself by the crackling fire while writing poetry inspired by the wild beauty that surrounded him. Despite the loneliness and isolation, Charlie discovered there a deep connection with nature and with himself. And as the wind howled through the mountains and the stars twinkled in the night sky, night fell over the Alaskan mountains, enveloping Charlie's cabin in a blanket of darkness and silence. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the wooden walls and dimly illuminating the small room where Charlie was retiring. Sitting in his worn armchair, Charlie stared at the fire with empty eyes, lost in his dark thoughts. As the months passed, what had previously given him good feelings became too painful. Loneliness enveloped him like an icy mantle, squeezing his heart with a feeling of emptiness and despair. Despite all the effort to find peace in the mountains, he still felt lost and lonely, as if adrift in a sea of despair. An icy breeze whispered through the cracks of the hut, making the flames of the fireplace dance in response. It was then that Charlie heard a distant sound, a soft, lonely bark echoing through the silent night. He frowned, surprised by the sound in that secluded place. Curious, Charlie slowly got up from the armchair and approached the door, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He opened the door cautiously and peered out, his breath caught in his throat as his eyes searched the darkness for the source of the sound. And then, emerging from the shadows of the night, a figure slowly approached the hut. It was a dog, a mongrel with thick fur and bright eyes, its tongue hanging out in a friendly smile. He stopped in front of Charlie, looking at him with an expression of curiosity and expectation. Charlie felt a comforting warmth spread across his chest as he looked at the dog, a sense of connection he hadn't experienced in a long time. He held out his hand shyly, letting the dog sniff it before gently stroking it behind the ears. "Hello, friend," muttered Charlie, his voice hoarse from lack of use. "What are you doing around here tonight? Is it lost?" The dog responded with a cheerful bark, its tail wagging animatedly in the air. It seemed almost as if he was inviting Charlie to accompany him on a journey through the dark and mysterious night. Charlie smiled for the first time in a long time, feeling a weight being lifted from his shoulders. He knew that this encounter with the dog wasn't just a coincidence. It was a sign that, even in the depths of loneliness, he could still find companionship and friendship. "Please come in. I must have some meat for you." With a sigh of relief, Charlie closed the cabin door behind him. In the days that followed, the friendship between Charlie and the dog grew and strengthened scorchingly, quickly turning into an inseparable partnership in the wild vastness of Alaska. The dog, which Charlie named Buddy, became his constant companion, following him on his hunts through the forests and mountains and sharing every moment of Charlie's no longer so lonely life. On cold, foggy mornings, Charlie and Buddy would go hunting together, scouring the woods for prey to ensure their survival. Buddy proved to be an excellent tracker and hunter, his canine skills complementing Charlie's, and together they ensured a good amount of food for his days in the cabin. Every afternoon, as the sun began to set on the horizon, Charlie and Buddy returned to the cabin, tired but satisfied with the day's work. While Charlie prepared dinner in the small kitchen, Buddy settled down near the fireplace, warming himself in the warmth of the fire and watching with watchful eyes every movement of his human friend. In the evening, when the night chill settled over the land, Charlie and Buddy snuggled together in front of the fireplace, sharing stories and secrets in silence. Charlie told Buddy about his tumultuous past, his hopes and dreams for the future, while Buddy listened intently, his gaze expressing silent understanding and solidarity. In moments of loneliness and sadness, Buddy was a comfort to Charlie, a constant and comforting presence that reminded him that he was not alone in the world. And in moments of joy and celebration, Buddy was a partner in play and mischief, filling the cabin with laughter and positive energy. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the friendship between Charlie and Buddy only grew stronger, withstanding the challenges of life in the wilds of Alaska. Together, they faced the dangers and uncertainties of the world, relying on each other for support and protection at all times. And as time passed and the seasons changed, Charlie and Buddy remained united, an inseparable pair of adventure companions, exploring the wonders as well as the mysteries of Alaska together, side by side. One night, as the sun was setting on the horizon, tinting the sky golden and orange as Charlie and Buddy hiked through the dense Alaskan forest. They were on a simple but essential mission, to gather enough firewood to keep the hut warm during the approaching winter. As they cut down fallen branches and piled up firewood, the sounds of the forest surrounded them, from the soft rustle of the wind in the trees to the rustle of leaves under their feet. Buddy sniffed the air, his ears alert for any sign of danger, while Charlie worked diligently, focused on his task. Suddenly, a rumbling sound broke through the stillness of the forest, causing Buddy to raise his head in alarm and Charlie to abruptly stop at his work. It was the deep, menacing roar of a black bear, echoing through the trees and sending shivers down Charlie's spine. With his heart pounding wildly in his chest, Charlie looked around frantically, looking for an escape route, but realized with despair that they were cornered. The bear was ahead, blocking the way back to the hut, and the rugged terrain around made it impossible to get around it without risking being attacked. Charlie tried to get his gun, but did not find it. Out of complete carelessness, he had forgotten it in the hut. With no weapons to defend himself and the bear getting closer and closer, Charlie felt fear take hold of him, an overwhelming sense of helplessness in the face of the force of nature. But then, in a moment of despair, he looked at Buddy next to him and saw the determination shining in his eyes. With a silent nod of understanding, Charlie and Buddy teamed up in a last-ditch effort to scare the bear away. Charlie raised his arms and screamed at the top of his lungs, challenging the animal with his human presence, while Buddy growled and barked beside him, showing his teeth in a sign of bravery. The bear hesitated for a moment with his gaze fixed on Charlie and Buddy, assessing the challenge before him. And then, with a low grunt, he turned around and slowly moved away, disappearing into the dense forest vegetation. A collective sigh of relief escaped Charlie and Buddy's lips as the bear left, leaving them shaking with adrenaline and gratitude for being alive. They looked at each other, sharing a moment of mutual understanding and respect, before resuming their journey back to the safety of their cabin, aware that as long as they were together, they could face whatever challenge nature brought them. That event made their friendship even stronger, but it was something that happened years after that left them forever connected. The night was dark and silent when Charlie was in his cabin, sleeping in his old bed, while Buddy rested at his feet. The soft crackling of the coals in the fireplace was the only sound in the darkness, faintly illuminating the small space with its comforting golden light. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside the hut, causing Buddy to rise in alert, his heart pounding in his chest. The dog immediately recognized the sound as something strange, since in those remote lands, unexpected visits were extremely rare. Then, with a deafening bang, the door of the hut was violently broken down, and an unknown man entered the space with an ominous expression on his face. His eyes flashed with malice and pent-up anger as he strode towards Charlie, clearly determined to do him harm. Charlie had no time for questions or negotiations. He knew that this man was not there to talk. He was there to kill him. With a mixture of fear and determination, Charlie searched for the rifle, but amid the confusion and darkness, he could not find it. All that remained for him was to shout aloud. "Who are you, and what do you want here?" Charlie demanded, his voice sounding braver than he felt inside. The man did not respond. Instead, he stepped forward with a gleaming knife in his hand, ready to strike. Months before that fateful night, Charlie and that man had had a heated argument about the cabin. The intruder was determined to buy Charlie's property, offering a generous sum in return. However, Charlie vehemently refused the offer. His connection to that piece of land and the moments shared there with Buddy were too precious to be sold for any amount of money. Charlie's refusal infuriated the man, who left vowing revenge for the denial of the deal. Since then, Charlie has always been alert, knowing that this disagreement could have serious consequences, but he never imagined that it would culminate in an invasion of his cabin with the intention of taking his life. It was at this moment that Buddy lunged forward, his sharp teeth digging into the assailant's leg with a wild fury. The man screamed in pain and surprise, trying to free himself from the dog's firm grip, but Buddy did not retreat, protecting his owner with all the strength he had. As the fight unfolded before his eyes, Charlie was perplexed. Seeing Buddy risk his own life to protect him was undeniable proof of the deep bond that bound them together. With one last effort, the intruder managed to free himself from Buddy's teeth and fled the hut, leaving behind a trail of blood and chaos. Charlie took a deep breath, his mind spinning with the intensity of the moment as he approached Buddy, whose fur was stained with blood, but whose eyes still shone with determination. With tears in his eyes, Charlie stroked Buddy's fur. The dog was injured, with some pretty deep knife cuts. However, he knew that, thanks to the courage and devotion of his faithful companion, they had escaped death that night. And as he tended to Buddy's wounds and prayed for him to recover, Charlie promised himself that he would do anything to protect the one who owed him his own life. After the violent confrontation in the cabin, Charlie realized that his life in the isolation of the forest was no longer viable. The imminent threat posed by the man who broke into their cabin made it clear that he and Buddy were no longer safe in that place. So, after taking care of Buddy's injuries as best he could and the dog regaining all its vigor, Charlie made a difficult decision. It was time to return to civilization. With a mixed feeling of apprehension and determination, Charlie began preparations to leave. He packed up his few possessions, put away the books of poetry he had written in the hut, and silently said goodbye to the life he had built in the forest. As he said goodbye to that wild landscape that had been his home for so many years, Charlie felt a lump in his throat. He turned to Buddy, his faithful companion, who looked at him with eyes full of trust and loyalty. With a sad smile, Charlie stroked Buddy's head and promised that no matter what happened, they would face the future together. So, with Buddy by his side, Charlie set off for the city, leaving behind the solitude of the forest and embarking on a new journey into the unknown. Along the still uncertain path, without a chosen destination, they met friendly and generous people who offered shelter and food, rekindling Charlie's hope for a better future. Life in those times seemed more tame than ever before. It was during one of these stops that they heard about Dallas, a vibrant and welcoming city where opportunities abounded and dreams could come true. Returning to Texas had not crossed Charlie's mind, but he began to cultivate that idea in him. The journey to Dallas was long and tiring, but Charlie and Buddy faced each obstacle with determination and hope. And when they finally arrived, they felt refreshed and full of expectation for what the future held. Together, they were ready to start a new adventure and build a happy and fulfilling life in the city. In Dallas, Charlie and Buddy began a new life filled with challenges and opportunities. With no contact there and not wanting to tie himself to any job, but at the same time, determined to move on, Charlie decided to use his talents to support himself and Buddy. Inspired by the experience he had with Sophie years ago, he began to sell his poems and also returned to making the copper crafts he had learned from her, since now this type of art did not cause him any discomfort anymore. Every day, Charlie set up his small stall on a busy city street, exposing his poems and handmade works to curious passers-by. With his gentle and charismatic manner, he won the sympathy of local residents, who appreciated his copper art as well as his poems. Although he lived on the street for a few months before he was able to truly settle down, when things began to prosper, he rented a small house in an outlying area. Buddy, in turn, became the unofficial mascot of Charlie's stall, delighting everyone with his loyalty and devotion. He was a constant companion to Charlie, and that impressed those who knew them. Buddy was always accompanying him in all his activities and bringing joy to those who passed by on the street. For Charlie, each sale of a poem or piece of handicraft was more than a business transaction. It was proof that he had overcome the difficulties of the past and found his place in the world, felt that he could prosper anywhere. And with Buddy by his side, he knew he'd never be alone again. Together, they would face whatever the future held, united by the indissoluble bond of friendship and companionship. In Dallas, Charlie and Buddy plunged headlong into urban life, exploring the city's busy streets and lively neighborhoods. While Charlie sold his poems and crafts, Buddy won hearts with his loyalty and infectious joy. It was during a busy night at a local bar that Charlie met Max, a bohemian and outgoing fellow who always seemed to be at the center of the parties and laughter. He was also a wanderer, just like Charlie had been for almost his entire life until then. But unlike Charlie, Max had never been able to shake off his relentless drug addiction, succumbing to temptation and also to a disorderly life. After all, Max had a captivating smile and a vibrant personality that appealed to everyone around him. And Charlie soon found himself caught up in his infectious energy, being dragged by him to various night events around town. Over the next few weeks, Charlie and Max became close friends, sharing stories, laughs, and even the occasional drink together. But Charlie held firm without giving in to temptation because of the drugs, while Max introduced Charlie to the best bars and clubs in town, taking him on nightly adventures that lasted until dawn. Charlie admired Max's joie de vivre and his ability to find beauty in the little things in life, while Max valued Charlie's sincerity and integrity. But Max's situation was not simple. He was going through a delicate moment, where due to the constant ballads he could no longer work during the day, which left him without money. And although he lived on the streets, the lack of money caused him to enter severe withdrawal crises. And it was Charlie, knowing how hard it was, that saved Max from self-destruction. Charlie took him to his own house and let him shelter under his roof. It created a strong bond between the two, something that Max could never repay. But a few years after they arrived in Dallas, already well established, tragedy struck. In those days before the crime, Charlie was already thinking of moving back to Miami. His heart was already healed and he felt that it would no longer be a problem to return to the beaches. On the contrary, it would be of extreme pleasure. Tragedy struck Dallas that dark night when a senseless act of violence claimed Charlie's life. As he and Buddy walked through the deserted streets, they were approached by a man whose heart was stained by darkness. In one fateful instant, one life was lost and another changed forever. The man, motivated by greed and cruelty, attacked Charlie, robbing him not only of his material belongings, but also of his life using a firearm. Buddy, loyal to the end, pounced on the offender, trying to protect his friend with all the strength he had. Its sharp claws scratched the skin of the offender, and its clenched teeth furiously bit his leg, leaving indelible marks on his flesh, tearing off even a piece of his pants. Despite Buddy's valiant efforts, The damage was already done. Charlie succumbed to his mortal injuries, leaving behind a painful emptiness and a sense of injustice that hung in the air. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, Buddy stood beside his fallen friend, guarding his body with silent devotion. News of the tragedy quickly spread through the city, leaving those who knew him grief-stricken. For Buddy, the loss of Charlie was a devastating blow. He had lost not just an owner, but a life partner, someone who had rescued him from the streets and given him a purpose. As he stood guarding Charlie's body, his eyes reflected a mixture of sadness and determination, a silent promise that he who had caused so much pain would pay for what he did. And so, as the sun rose over Dallas that fateful morning, a story of friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice came to a tragic and premature end. Buddy stood by the casket, a silent testament to the pain he felt at the loss of his companion. His eyes, once full of life and joy, now overflowed with sadness and despair. He refused to leave there, as if determined to protect the body of its owner at all costs. Those present watched with admiration and concern Buddy's determination. Some tried to persuade him to leave, offering him food and affection, but the dog remained irreducible. He growled and bared his teeth, as if ready to confront anyone who tried to separate him from Charlie, especially to Max, the ragamuffin, who at that moment was singing a farewell song to his friend, exhaling alcohol over a shower of Buddy's barking that seemed to want to drive him away. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a man watched the scene with interest. Frank, a retired detective, had known Charlie for years. They had crossed paths several times in the streets, sharing stories and experiences that only those who live in the shadows know. Although they had never had a deep friendship, it still intrigued him, because, like Charlie, he had owned a faithful dog since the days when he still works for the police. Seeing Buddy next to the coffin, something inside Frank ignited. Determined to uncover the truth behind Charlie's death, Frank undertakes to investigate the case on his own. He knew that it would not be easy, but he was determined to find the culprit and bring justice to the fallen fellow. Retired Detective Frank returned to the crime scene with renewed determination, his eyes scanning every detail for clues that could help him unravel the mystery behind Charlie's death. The darkness of night had given way to daylight, revealing an urban landscape marked by the tragedy that occurred there. As Frank searched the place, his keen eyes caught a glimpse of something unusual on the ground. Crouching down to examine it more closely, he discovered a torn piece of fabric, stained with fresh blood. That could be the key to unraveling what had happened that fateful night. Carefully, Frank packed the piece of fabric in a plastic bag, ensuring its preservation for later analysis. He knew that that piece of evidence could contain crucial information about Charlie's attacker, and he was determined to explore every possibility to find justice. As he tucked the piece of fabric into his research briefcase, Frank felt a mixture of emotions sweeping through him. Anger, determination, and sadness mingled within his heart, propelling him to continue his tireless search for the truth. While Buddy stood by Charlie's gravestone, vigilant and determined, Frank worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery behind Charlie's death. He knew the case was more complex than it seemed, with hidden secrets and dark motivations that would lead him to dark and dangerous places. Frank's meticulous investigation began to reveal clues that led him to an unlikely suspect, Max, the guy Charlie had met in Dallas. As Frank connected the dots and gathered evidence, a picture began to form, revealing a dark picture of envy, addiction, and betrayal. Max, a man consumed by envy and the desire for a life that was not his own, had looked at Charlie with a mixture of admiration and resentment. From the moment Charlie took him to his own house, Max planned to kill him, not because he hated him, but because he knew that if he eliminated him, he could get what was his, without arousing suspicion. This is all because drugs had already greatly altered their perception of reality. For while Charlie found joy in the little things in life and cultivated genuine relationships, Max sank deeper and deeper into his addiction and the bitterness of an empty existence. In a moment of weakness and upset caused by the drug, Max succumbed to his darkest impulses and committed the heinous act that took Charlie's life. The money Charlie had with him became the source of his temptation, a quick way to satisfy his addiction and temporarily escape the reality that consumed him. As Frank delved deeper into the investigation, interviewing witnesses and analyzing evidence, the truth began to emerge, clear and undeniable. And it was when the DNA result obtained through the piece of blood that Buddy had ripped off that the truth came to light. Max was responsible for Charlie's death, an act that not only took the life of a good man, but also left a hole in Buddy's life. As Frank prepared to confront Max and bring him to justice, he felt a mixture of emotions within himself. Anger and indignation were mixed with the determination to do what was right. Months had passed since Charlie's fateful murder, but Buddy stood firm as a sentry by the grave of his beloved owner. His fur was more worn and his eyes more tired, as if he had aged many years in a short time, but his loyalty remained unwavering. He spent his days and nights there, watching over Charlie like a lone guardian amid the silence of the graveyard. It was then that Frank, the headstrong detective who had devoted his energy to the search for the truth, appeared before Buddy. His footsteps echoed across the sacred ground, interrupting the stillness of the place. Frank approached with reverence, acknowledging the silent devotion of the dog. "Buddy," Frank said in a soft voice, his expression reflecting a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Thanks to you, we were able to find the man who took Charlie's life. He's behind bars now, paying for what he did." The little dog raised its head, its dark eyes fixed on Frank's. He could sense the seriousness in the detective's words, but he could also sense something deeper, a silent connection between two beings who had been touched by the same tragedy. Frank moved closer, reaching out to stroke Buddy's head. "You did more than you could, my friend," he said gently. "Now it's time to rest, to move on." But Buddy didn't move. He looked at Charlie's grave, feeling a tightness in his heart. He knew that he could not leave his owner alone. Not now, not after everything they had gone through together. With a resigned sigh, Frank walked away, leaving Buddy behind in the silence of the graveyard. He knew that he could not force the dog to abandon its guard post. And so, Buddy remained there, day after day, year after year, until finally the time came to reunite with his beloved owner for eternity. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.